Robert, how you doing? It's a pleasure to have you on Just Get a Real Job. You're the CEO, the artistic director of Birds of Paradise Theatre. Last year, you just celebrated 30 years. One of the sort of leading disability theatre companies in Scotland and the leading theatre company itself. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me on. Thank you.
How are you anyway? Do you want to sort of kick off the episode? Do you want to introduce yourself to our listeners? I mean, you're in the list's top 100 in Scotland and stuff. You're quite a well-known figure in the creative industry. So someone I've been wanting to have on the show for a while, and I'm thrilled to have you. But do you want to introduce yourself for our listeners?
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, I've been working in the arts now for about 25 years, but it feels ridiculous because, I go through that old, but obviously I am. And yeah, in a way, I never planned to be involved in theatre. I grew up in a sort of theatrical family. But as a disabled young person, I thought, well, there's no way that I'll get a job in theatre because it's not realistic. Certainly back in the 90s, it would have been a ridiculous idea for a guy with speech impairment, a guy with using a wheelchair, to be working in theatre. It just wouldn't happen back then. And then I guess things just happened. Like I was doing public speaking, and I got approached by a company in Edinburgh called Theatre Workshop, and they said, would you like to come and audition for the company? And at that point, I'd never been on stage, I'd never been involved in acting really, but I was cranky, I was cocky, I was very confident. I thought, yeah, why not give it a go? Never gig, I would never do anything like that, but back then, yeah. And so when I auditioned, I got the job, and that was a 1-year contract, which was great because you got a year to learn the craft, learn about how to be on stage and how to make that work. And then from there, other jobs came up. I began to freelance as an actor. You begin to network and get to know people. And then now, sort of 25 years later, we're still doing it. So in a way, it's a weird. I look back and go, I don't quite know how that happened, but I'm quite glad that it did. So, yeah.
Well, lots of hard work, lots of passion, lots of talent. Sure, have all helped in that.
But I think I've got a lot of luck. There's a lot of good fortune and being in the right place at the right time, and there's a lot of that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think what I've learned from doing this show for over nearly coming up, this is our 5th year of doing it, but from interviewing so many people is, I think often, I mean, I'm bad for sometimes saying, oh, I'm just really lucky. And I do feel lucky, but I do think as well, you make your own luck through hard work and you create those opportunities through what you do. So sometimes I feel like as creatives, we always sort of caveat things by saying we're quite lucky. And it almost feels like we're putting ourselves down by saying that. So I always try and think about that.
I think I'm going quite a Scottish thing, I think as Scottish people, we're never going to say, well, yeah, I worked really hard and this is why I got where I am today. It's not really in our nature. But I think it is a combination of luck and making the right decision at the right time. And yeah, there's so many things that come into play.
Yeah, completely. There's so much in your first answer, Robert, I kind of want to unpack as well. You were talking about growing up in the 90s with a disability, feeling like theatre wasn't like a sort of viable career. I mean, this podcast called Just Get a Real Job, it's all about that idea of people working in the arts, not thinking like, a career and it's possible and people's pathways. But like, I suppose to start, what do you think the differences are between then and now? Because obviously you work with a lot of up and coming work, creatives through Birds of Paradise, especially around disability and things. Do you think it's easier maybe now, 30 years later, than it was when you were growing up? And because of course there's still many barriers facing artists today, but what's your sort of feelings on that?
I mean, it's definitely easier. There's more opportunities and more pathways. I mean, like yesterday I met with a disabled playwright, and I was thinking to them about how bad I felt because we couldn't offer them a job right now because we haven't got the job to offer them.
Mm,
I think I was thinking to them that there's about 40 disabled playwrights in Scotland now who I could list right away and go, not that they're all at the top of the game, but they're all developing, establishing playwrights. Now, when I was growing up, there were not 40 disabled playwrights in Scotland.
mhm,
That wasn't a thing. So I look at that and go, yeah, we have come a long way. We've achieved a lot. We've still got a long way to go, but we're coming a long way. I think a lot of it is about role models. So when I grew up, there were no disabled folk on TV and film,
mhm,
or there were no. So of course, I didn't imagine myself in there because I didn't see anybody who looked like me in there. And now
mhm.
you got cognition speech standards, you get all the soaps who've got disabled characters played by disabled actors. That's a big thing, you know. It's not
Completely.
so big. It's not so big because non-disabled people are now seeing disabled people on TV, and they're realizing that it's not a big deal. That that being disabled, obviously it's a big deal, but in other ways you just get on with it and you make it work. So I think the role that like TV and film has played in normalizing disability has been massive.
Completely. I think it's like what you're saying though. If you don't see something represented, then it doesn't feel possible for you. And I think, like from the outside, it does look like there's more of that on screen, and more. It's more talked about as well, so it feels more like normalized, and like opportunities will be equal for everyone. No, completely. But I think there's obviously, as you say, there's still a lot of work to do, and I mean, I'm neurodivergent, I'm dyslexic and dyspraxic, and I do a lot of work on that in TV to try and make the TV industry more accessible for people with disabilities. I was lucky enough to be involved in a film called Working Differently a few years ago, all about that neurodivergence in the workplace and stuff. And it's great that we can have things like that, but I do still feel like there's so much work to do on it. And that's why it's so lovely to have someone like yourself on this show. And, to see something like Birds of Paradise do so well and be such a trailblazer in the space, because, unfortunately, there's a lot of theatres still don't have the best disability access for people to go and even see shows because of the way they're built. I mean, you'll know more than me, as well. Like, there's still a lot of work to do and things. But something I want to ask you, Robert, as well, if you're happy to talk about it, is do you mind talking a bit about your disability for our listeners? Because I've had, as I mentioned to you off air, had Jack Hunter on the show before, who's got cerebral palsy. I've had Michael McEwen, I think his name is, on the show before as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's really important to speak to as many different people across the arts as possible, and it's lovely to get it. But if you're happy to talk about it, I think it's always really nice
Yeah.
to just get your perspectives and stuff.
I mean, funny, I went to school with Michael so long time ago.
Oh,
I know because I know Jack quite well. So you now get three guys with cerebral palsy all in your school. And
that's brilliant, man.
there's a funny thing where the exec director, Bob Murray, keeps making a joke about why is it always guys with cerebral palsy that are talking about stuff. I'm like, I don't know if it's not fault. So yeah, so I was born with cerebral palsy, but it's basically a brain injury that happens during birth, and that affects a
Mhm.
bit of your brain that controls like coordination, speech, balance, stuff like that. So at its simplest, it's just a brain injury that affects how your muscles move. But
Mhm.
obviously that then affects your speech, affects you in different ways. And the thing about cerebral palsy is the degree to which you can have CP equates. So like Jack, for example, has got fairly mild CP, he can walk, his speech isn't really affected because you get quite a different experience to CP. But it's interesting because a lot of the people that I work with have all got CP. I wonder what brings us all into the arts. There's something about being quite gobby or quite, I don't know what it is, but we've all found a home in theatre.
That is quite interesting, actually, from knowing the three of you and from chatting to the three of you. You are all very, you're very, and I mean gobby as a compliment. Like you were very outspoken, and like I can imagine you must be the same way. You're going to say what you want to say, and I love that.
Yeah.
That's really nice. And no, it is interesting that you're all sort of working in the arts, but I think that's brilliant. And thank you for opening up about that as well. I think it's just really important to talk about. A lot of people still don't understand these things or they don't maybe want to ask because it feels like they don't,
And I think that's when you can get a really important job where we can talk about things that are maybe a bit more difficult to ask about, and we can do it in a story, or we can put it on stage in a way that makes it more relatable, so that people are not going, oh God, that thing called disability over there, I don't understand it and I don't know how to act about it. That sort of fear doesn't help anybody, I don't think.
No, completely. And I think what's lovely about Birds of Paradise's work and some of the things you've been involved with as well is a lot of your shows they're universal as well. And they're not all just like, this is a show that's really sad and depressing. It's like you're making work that is fun, and that you don't just have to, it doesn't have to just necessarily always be about disability. It's just you're making a show in an accessible way that's about lots of different things. And I think that's really nice.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the key things for me as a director is recognizing that going to the theatre is quite a big ask. Like having to get out your house, get dressed and get in the car and go to the venue and all of that, it's a lot of hassle. Like you can put on Netflix or iPlayer. Why bother going to the theatre? So to make it worth that hassle, we have to make it a really good night out. We have to make it entertaining. That doesn't mean that everything has to be happy, jolly. It's not that, but it has to be worth the effort. You have to tell a story that makes people see things in a different way, or that makes them appreciate the world differently. So that's where to me it's about how do we do that in ways that are entertaining, in ways that surprise people, in ways that make people think. And that's what I always trying to do. Disability is always a part of that, but you don't always know, you don't always see it coming. So like that we did at the French in 2018, My Left Right Foot was a big musical. So most people coming to that are going, great, I'm going along to see a big bold musical. Now it happens that there's a big part of that that's about a disabled character. But that's not what you're advocating. It's not the flag that you're flying. You're getting people in, and then once you got them in there, then you can tell them whatever you want to tell them. I always joke about the great thing about theatre is that once you sit down, obviously you can walk out, but you're not likely to. So you're sort of stuck. And I've got you there for an hour and a half, and I can make you uncomfortable, I can make you laugh, I can make you cry, I can do all these things to you. And that's quite rare, because things like TV or film, if you don't like it, you can walk away, you can turn it off. Yeah, with theatre, it's harder to walk away from, and that's quite useful for me.
It's completely. And sometimes you do all three of those things in one show, and you're like, "Whoa, I've done it all!" Laugh, cried, and and that's always the magical part of it. I want to ask you a lot about your sort of role at Birds of Paradise and the questions about how you sort of are artistic director and things. But just to go back slightly, like, tell us about a time where you went to the theatre when you were younger and it did what we just talked about to you. Do you remember going to the theatre and seeing something that did all that?
I mean, when I said my family were quite theatrical in that they were part of an underground group where I grew up. So
Mhm.
even at the age of like 4 or 5, I was going along to rehearsals and stuff. They couldn't find a babysitter, so I was getting watch a rehearsal, and that was what I grew up on. So I was going to bring that theatrical world. And I guess thinking back, things like the annual pantomime, so there'd be a week in January where this group would put on a panto for, I think, 500 people every night would come to this panto. And I also remember the finale of a panto when you got the sort of the rousing song that everyone's like, it's all ended well, we're all happy, we can all go home happy and be be part of the world again. And even at a very young age, I remember that sense of belonging to something, or being part of something that was bigger, that I also enjoyed. And to me,
Mm.
I think that's why theatre got something that I think quite magical, is that you're part of
Yeah.
something bigger than yourself.
Completely, completely. And the other thing I want to ask you, you're talking about your family being doing Amdram and being very theatrical and stuff. Tell us a bit about your growing up and your upbringing, and where are you from as well? Tell us about where you're from and how that's influenced you as well.
Yeah, I was born in, look, I grew up in a place called Kirkton, just to the north of
Hmm.
Glasgow. So
Hmm.
I'm a West Coast boy. I was born in 1980, so I started school in 85. About that time, disabled people were going to special schools, but that was just the norm. So I went to special school in Glasgow called Richmond Park up until I was 12. I then moved to another special school called Ash Creek. And these were quite small schools that were either were accessible but also were making a way that disabled people could get physio, could get speech therapy, could get all these things that if you're in a
Mm.
mainstream school wouldn't have been possible at that time. But then when I was about 15, I realized that I didn't feel part of the sort of special school environment. I felt like I wasn't being challenged enough. I wasn't
Mm.
being, I wasn't around enough of my peers. I was only ever around other disabled people, and that's a bit weird. It's a bit.
Yeah.
It would be weird for any group to only be around that group. So at 15, I started to move to my local school called Glencoe Academy. So for fifth year and sixth year, for my hires, I went to Glencoe Academy, which was a massive change, in
Yeah.
1996, to go from a little school of 120 pupils to a school of 1,600. Well, doing your
Wow.
hires, doing all of that, it was massive. It was a massive sort of cultural shift as well.
Mm.
But was great. I loved it and made a lot of great things there. Really sort of that set me on a course. So I then went to Glasgow Uni, and it's funny you're talking about, get a real job. I went to Glasgow Uni to study computing science because, it was 1998 and computing science was the thing that we all thought this was going to make us a fortune, and it was something that I enjoyed, and I thought, yeah, this will be great, and I'll get a career in IT and do something like that. And then I got to second year, and I realized that everyone who was doing computer science, lovely people, but they were geeks, they were sort of, they were not the most, they weren't the most chatty people, they were quite,
They weren't
serious.
gobby like you.
No, exactly. So that I don't really fit in here either. So then I started getting philosophy, and I also did a bit of theatre at Glasgow Uni. I did first and second year theatre. But again, like, I didn't do that as my degree because I would never get a job in theatre. So why would you want a theatre degree if you can't work in it. And then literally 2 months after I picked my honours, I got a job in Seeker, and then it all changed after that.
Oh wow! Oh, thank you for sharing your time and upbringing stuff. It's really interesting to hear about. And but you also did a bit of business management with your computing sciences, didn't you?
Yeah.
And that's interesting because I imagine now that you're the artistic director and CEO of Birds Paradise, you're probably like, okay, this business stuff's actually quite useful because I'm kind of also running a business.
In a way, I use more of my business degree than I want to believe. But yeah, because so much of what we do in Seeker, it's marketing, it's
Mm-hmm.
business development, it's PR, or a lot of it, like, I spent the whole morning working with spreadsheets and getting budgets sorted. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely been a good grounding for that.
Completely. I actually think that often creatively, because I studied film and theatre at uni, and then I did a screenwriting, I did a master's screenwriting degree. But one thing I think back on, and something I try to use the podcast to do, is I actually think entrepreneurialism and business and stuff is, as we just touched on, it's really useful to know that stuff. Whether you work in theatre, TV, film, you're an artist. We have to now sell ourselves, especially in the way that things work now. And we have to be able to, as you say, do the spreadsheets, apply for budgets. Like, I think there's definitely more we could probably learn from that sort of world, and something I would like to do more of on the podcast this year is interview those type of people for sure, because I think they're really useful to.
I think for a long time, the arts world were quite negative about, business or marketing or any of that. They're like, I want to make art, I don't want to talk about advertising campaigns. But it's all part of the same thing, It's like what I call a play, the title that I give it, is part of how I market it, So I think it's all part of the same sort of thing that we need to work out, At the end of the day, you're making Seeker for an audience. Well, at least I am, because I think if you're not, you're just being self-indulgent, and you might as well stay at home and do that by yourself. But
Completely.
you're making it for the audience, therefore they have to come and see it. So that is marketing, that is developing a business, Yeah, I think it's all.
No, completely. I think it's useful.
I think the way that we divide it up isn't always helpful. It's all part of the same sort of thing.
Definitely. I mean, it's really interesting, and yeah, something I think you're right. I just think as creative, often creatively, we want to just go, well, I want to make the best stories, and we don't always like to think about things like money or marketing, as you say. But I think it's important to have. Well, I suppose you just need some people in your team that can do that. That's the other thing. We're all got different skills, so you'll know this from running a team and working with people. Like, it's important to maybe know, well, I'm good at this, but they're good at that. So do you know what I mean? I'll share our skills and stuff, because we are all different.
Yeah, thankfully.
No, it's really interesting. I want to come back as well. So you're talking about, you did that first play in Edinburgh, you were saying, and you had a 1-year contract. Tell us a bit about your pathway then. Like, was there a moment where you thought, I could make a career in theatre. This might be possible now. I don't need the computers anymore. This could all.
I think so. Like I was talking about when I did that 1-year vesting actor contract at Seeker Workshop, I then built up contacts. So you get, especially amongst the sort of disability seeker world, at that point it's quite a small community, so we all got to know each other pretty quickly. And that was great, because then when there's another job coming up, you can go, right, he'd be good for that job, or she'd be good for that job. So it all became a sort of a way of getting other work. So that's where after that 1 year, I think for the next 2 or 3 years, I just went from job to job and doing other roles for other companies around the UK, and that was great. At the end, and funny, because you said, when did you think you could make it as a career? I still don't think I have. I think there is a bit of you that's always going, well, I'll keep doing it for now, and then when people stop asking me to do it, I'll go and get a proper job. And I hear that half jokingly, but I think the minute you go, right, this is what I'm gonna do forever. I think you lose a little bit of your spark or something, because like even now we're all waiting to hear about funding in Scotland. So we've got 2 weeks time we all hear about funding, and then we can all make plans and relax a little bit and get on with doing the work. But at the moment we're all going, well, if we're going to get funded, I could go back to my computer science stuff. I could go back and become an accountant or a business development person or that's so there's always that fallback that you want to have. And that's really important because a job in the arts is never going to be secure, and I don't think it should be that secure because you want to keep making your best work, and you want to keep once I start making shows that are a bit dull and a bit predictable and a bit comfortable, then I need to stop doing this job, and other people need to come up and do a better job and tell me to bugger off. So that's what I mean is like complacency, I think is a pretty dangerous thing in theatre. So I
I
don't
think it's a
want
dangerous thing in life, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I think that's really
completely,
interesting, Robert. Yeah,
completely. But I can imagine, and maybe I'm wrong, but I can imagine being an accountant or being a programmer or whatever. You can become a bit more comfortable about what you're doing
yeah,
and who you are. Whereas I think when you're making theatre, yeah, you don't want to be that comfortable. You want to be a little bit hungry for it, because that grinds you to make it work.
that's so interesting. I never thought about it in that way before. But I suppose it's that thing you're saying is you want to be kept on your toes slightly, so you don't just go,
Yeah,
well, I've got 10 years to make all this. So see if this year's show's a bit crap. Then I suppose that's maybe like the mindset that would come into it. It's interesting. I never thought about that
yeah,
because I'm somebody that struggles. I struggle with not having security or comfort, but maybe at the same time that drives me to work harder.
yeah,
So it's like, I suppose
yeah.
it's a trade-off, isn't it? But it's an interesting way of looking at it. I really like the way you sort of articulated
Because
that.
we always talk about in theatre that we haven't got enough time, we haven't got enough money. But we're always complaining about that. And that's true. Like, I'm not denying it for a moment. But also, when you have got more time and you get more money, you get less pressure. And like I work well under pressure. I work well to
Mm.
get going. I need someone to be on my back. So yeah, I think we all need to be careful what you wish for.
I suppose if you want in a happy balance, you want the funding
Yeah,
opportunities, you want the
yeah,
money and resources to make great theatre and to build a more sustainable industry completely. Because we're in a really shit time at the moment where
yeah.
across
Totally.
theatre, across the arts. But at the same time, as you're saying, you also want to have that hunger. So I suppose it's finding that happy balance, isn't it?
Totally. And I'm saying that as a very privileged person in the industry where I've had a lot of opportunity to make work and to do things. So I fully recognize that people will be watching this going, sorry for him because but I do think it is a bit of balance. You need
Mm.
that balance.
But I think you're very aware of like and very like self-aware of your position, and I think you're very much someone that has used their position to help others and to what I like to say, put the ladders down behind you and help people access the arts and get in for them. I mean, that's so vital.
Hopefully, yeah. I mean, it just feels obvious to me that, a big part of the argument that we're always making is that we need more diversity in the arts. We need more, like, for hundreds of years, theatre have been telling the same stories over and over again about white men, middle-aged white men, and they're all quite dull now because we've heard them over and over again. So we need new stories. New stories come from having more diverse people in the arts. So yes, I want to get more disabled people into the arts because I think it's right, sort of morally right, if you like. But I'm also doing it because I think it makes the work better. I think it's more interesting to hear different stories. If it's the same old stuff over and over again, yeah,
No,
pretty go.
completely. Yeah, you want a range of voices, and
Yeah,
you want to, as always, as you say, it makes it richer, it makes the stories richer.
yeah.
Um, I suppose a good question for you then, in the position you're in, is what do you think are the sort of main stumbling blocks at the moment in the theatre, and particularly in Scotland and the UK? Like, what are some of the things you would, if you had a magic wand, you would change?
I think we're in a place where, especially in Scotland, I think a lot of the theatres and a lot of the directors and casting people are getting on board and they want to employ more disabled actors. They want to put disabled people on stage. You know, if I look back at Christmas, you know, the Air Gaiety had two guest performers in a pantomime. The Lyceum is a disabled performer in their Christmas show. Now, so then, right away, there's three deaf and disabled actors on stage in Scotland. That would have been unheard of even 5 years ago. So I think we
Mm,
have moved forward and we've got a lot of great people. I worry that because now the resources have become so scarce that people see things like accessibility as an extra, as a bonus. You know, we'll do that if we can afford it. And the
mm,
problem is that when resources are cut back, those are the things that are cut back on. Because, you know, it costs too much or it's too expensive or whatever. So that's where I worry now that we need to hang on to that stuff and keep moving
mm.
forward. And I hope with more funding coming from the government, I hope that will keep getting better. I think also we just need to keep doing it, keep making mistakes, keep trying new things. Um, you know, three actors in Scotland being in Christmas shows who are deaf and disabled is great, but it's still way too small. You know, it
Yeah,
should be a
completely. It's
lot,
nothing really. It's a drop in the
should
ocean,
be
isn't
a
it?
lot more. So we need to just keep getting more people into the stage who are disabled, deaf, and other ways diverse. Just to make it a much more exciting picture, you know. So
Mm.
yeah, I feel like we're in the right direction, but we're nowhere near there yet.
No, completely. Do you think, I mean, asking from your own experience as well, do you think an issue, because it's something I've observed in TV, and I used to work in TV development, and I think we're all guilty of this accidentally, because we all have hidden biases and we all want to work with people we know. But do you think a problem is people often just hire who they know well, who they're maybe friends with, who the right is in right in front of them? So say you're, I don't know, a casting director for a big theatre company or something, and you don't really have many disabled friends or friends of color or friends who,
Yeah,
whatever background they're from, and all your friends kind of just look and sound like you, and and it's not even malicious. You're just like, oh, I'll hire them because they're right there. Do you think that's the same in theatre? Because I think that happens in TV all the time.
I think it's a major part of the experience, and you can understand why because there's so much risk already in what you're doing. You know, TV and film, you're spending so much money that it could take a punt on someone who might go over the goods but might not. It's a big risk. Whereas if it's something that you know, if it's something that you're like, yeah, I know they can go over this job, then you're gonna, yeah, you're gonna play it a little bit safe. I don't know how we ever get over that because I think it's a very natural instinct. I know that I do it.
Yeah.
I know that I go, okay, I'll go with them because I know they can do the job that I need done. And if I didn't do that, the end result isn't as good. And then people say, well, why was that play not as good? So, you know, if you want trying to make quality and take a big risk at the same time is very difficult to do. But it's where we need to go, it's what we need to do. We also need to start making friends with people who are not like us. You know,
Yeah.
going back to my earlier comment about being at special needs school and recognizing that I was surrounded by disabled people. And that was felt a bit strange to me because the world isn't all disabled, the world isn't all white, it isn't all anything. So there's something for me about a variety of the people that we mix with, the people that we interact with, the
Completely.
people that I think there's more variety. And that goes back
Yeah.
to my point about the stories that we put on stage. You know, because if we're telling stories to the audience of disabled people that they're not familiar with, then that sort of opens their eyes and broadens their horizon. And then they go, okay, maybe I could mix with other people. So all there's sort of a big circular motion here, hopefully that comes together.
Mm. No, brilliant. I completely agree with you. I think that's some really nice points. So, and I think you're right about risk. I think risk is, I don't know, it's a natural thing, isn't it? Especially when money's limited.
Yeah. Risk sounds great. Like we know the ideal risk globally, but in practical terms, risk costs money, and if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work, you know? So, it's difficult. So difficult.
I think we just maybe sometimes in the arts we need to, especially from broadcasters or, theatre companies or whatever it might be, we need to maybe just allow more opportunity for people to fail. I think often
Yeah.
TV will make a series and it'll bomb. Say we make a series, no one watches it. We'll just not make another series. Whereas back in the day, I feel when there was more money or time, you could take a punt, and because often stuff gets better in a second series, or you do a show and it maybe doesn't work, but then you rewrite it slightly and it plays amazing. So I think it's like trying to have that attitude that things can fail and that's a good thing because you learn from failure.
I completely agree in theory. The problem is that now we are surrounded by so much technology and so many algorithms that tell us where things are going wrong. Like if you look at things like Netflix now, they know the point at which people stop watching a program.
Yeah,
They know
completely. That's very true.
they know that they stop watching at 32 minutes. So therefore at that point you have to do something that will keep them watching. And I love technology. This isn't coming from someone who isn't in favour of tech, but I do worry that it eliminates that opportunity for risk because we get so much knowledge about about what works and what doesn't work. And then you get the whole AI question of, at some point AI will be able to write a perfect play or a perfect film. And then you go, well, that's deeply worrying because there is no perfect play. But it'll cry,
No,
it'll get funny. And I think we need to be
it's
very
scary.
careful where we're going,
I suppose just out of curiosity, have you used much AI in your company? Because this is something I feel very conflicted on the AI thing. So, I mean, I'm not talking about as much in the show before, but I've started using AI for the podcast now because I run this myself on the side of a full-time job. Anything that makes my life more efficient, I mean, it's still all my work, but as a dyslexic person as well, AI is actually so helpful to me because it's the best spell checker I've ever had. Like when I was at school, I was using an Alpha Smart and stuff. Now I've got this amazing tech, and I think it's wonderful in some ways because it helps me. I don't know. It just helps me a lot in some ways. But at the same time, I do get why people are really scared of AI, and I don't want it to replace my creativity. I just want it to use it to help me create my work and get my stuff across. But what do you think about it? Do you use it much in Birds of Paradise or anything?
We're using it a little bit. I mean, we're doing some work in Nepal, for example, and I was like, I've got a script here that's in English, and I want to translate it into Nepalese. Now, Google Translate can get a wee bit of that, but the quality of Google Translate was never that good because it didn't understand what you were saying. If you now stick it through AI and say, I want you to translate it into Nepalese, you get a much better end result. Still not perfect, but it's better. So we use AI a little bit for things like that. I think I'm quite a control freak. So, for example, if I'm getting AI to do my social media posts, I go back and edit them because I think that I can write it better than AI can. So I'm way not really. I think AI is not as good yet as it will be. Once it is great, I think we'll be using it a lot more. At the moment, I think it's still developing. We're still working at what it can do. You know, we're still when you ask AI to draw a picture, you're still getting four fingers and things like that. What you're going, well, you're not that intelligent, are you? So, but I think it will be a really difficult time because we need to look at what we do use it for, we do use it for, but it's not going away. So we have to work over this out.
Embrace.
Yeah. Or
Yeah, it's a tricky
I
one for
mean,
sure.
maybe not embrace, but at least work with it. You know, like I'm not saying we
That's a
have
better way
to.
of putting it.
Yeah, we don't have to love it. We have to know that it's there. You know.
I think that's probably a better way of describing it. No, thank you for answering that as well. Let's talk about Birds of Paradise in particular then, because obviously last year you celebrated 30 years. You've been in post there. What, 10 years you've been the artistic director?
12,
Wow.
12 years. Yeah.
12 years.
Yeah.
Whoa. Tell us about your 12 years being artistic director and stuff. How's the company growing? And tell us a bit about the company for those that might not know, because we've got listeners all across the world actually. So
Yeah. I mean, 12 years sounds like a long time, and it's a long time. The first 4 years, I was part time for only 2 days a week, and there was another artistic director who was also part time, and he and I worked together, and we also worked separately on different productions, and we had a great relationship and going very well. Gary Robson was his name. Gary unfortunately died last year, so quite a sad thing to lose like a great colleague and friend. So Gary and I worked together for about 4 or 5 years, and then Gary left, and I sort of became the full-time artistic director of Birds of Paradise. And that's been a really interesting journey because 2012, I'm working away, and then after, we hit 2020, we hit the pandemic and everything changes. So 2020 to about 23 doesn't really count because we're doing a lot of stuff, but it wasn't like making theatre in the way that we were doing before. It was very different to how it used to be. And we're now back to that old way of making theatre, but it's taken quite a while to get back there. A lot of what we've done in the last 12 years has been about putting really high quality theatre on stage. At least trying to. You don't always get it right, but you're always aiming to make great shows that people want to come and see and that people are entertained by. And a lot of that is because the audiences before used to say, well, it's great that disabled people can do this, but they're not that good, are they? So the quality argument became really important. In the same way that when we speak to other companies, we have to go, why are you not pointing people out? Because they go, well, they're not that good. So it became our job to show how good they can be, so that we take away that excuse. So the last couple of years will be a lot about putting excellent work on stage, supporting other disabled artists to develop their craft, and then supporting other companies to become more inclusive, more accessible. So we talk about what makes three strands, Bob Seeker for we make the work, Bob Development where we support other people, and then Bob Strategic where we support other companies. And they all work together, but that's how we sort of divide it up.
Yeah.
A lot of the work we do is also international now. So you talk about people from other countries. So, like I say, we're working in Nepal at the moment. Over the last sort of 5 years, we've covered Mexico, Brazil, Rwanda, Nepal, India. We've covered a lot of countries where they want to develop disabled art and they want disabled artists to become theatre makers, and we hopefully be able to help them find a way to do that. So we're not going in there with all of the answers, but we're going in to say, here's how we're going to evolve. Can we give you a little bit of support to make it work for you?
Oh, that's brilliant. I love what you were saying about the quality thing as well. Like, almost so defiant. It's like, well, you know, if you're going to doubt us, then we're going to make sure we have the best quality, and we'll prove to you that you're wrong. And I think that's so important. And you have done that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think people talk about Birds of Paradise around. I mean, this industry with such like high regard. Like, you know, you guys are like leaders in what you do, and I mean, you don't need me to tell you that. Like, I think a lot of the quality, you know, speaks for itself. And I think it's wonderful that you've been able to help, you know, create that and lead that. And I mean, it's really important and really inspiring as well.
Great.
I suppose I want to ask you about what your role as a CEO and artistic director sort of entails, like, because that's different to just, as we were talking about, being a creative and being an actor and stuff. What are the sort of free, sort of maybe humans love the number three, but what are free skills you think that are quite important to do in that job?
When coming about planning ahead, so we've just written a business plan for 2025 to 2028. Now, in reality, we got no idea what's going to happen in 2028 because, you know, I've not got a magic ball and the world could be completely different. But you have to have some degree of ability to go, okay, the audience want to see what in this area or talking about this sort of thing. So there's a little bit of foresight, forecasting, and sort of trying to work out where things are going in the world, and what they are getting sort of excited by. Like, so that's, I think, number one, that sort of Mystic Meg aspect of being an artistic director. I think the second big one is just about working with people. Directors and artistic directors quite often get a hard time because people say, well, all you do is employ other people and they do all of the hard work. And you're like, well, yeah, that my job is to employ the best people and to let them get on with doing the best work that they can. That's the job. You know, there's no shame in that. That's what we do. And so a lot of the job is about understanding people and about trying to work out, okay, if I get you and you together, what will happen? What will that end up? What will be the result of that work? And so a lot of it is sort of matchmaking or getting people together and hoping that they make something exciting from that. So that's number two. Number three, I think it's something about risk. You know, we've always got not enough money, not enough time not never goes. And there's something about as a CEO being able to take a risk that's not a stupid risk. That's not, like you don't want to be going, yeah, let's do it anyway because, we're going to end up bankrupt. But you still need to keep risk in the mix. You still need to, so there's a little bit of a mind of that risk about knowing when to say yes and when to say no. It's quite a big thing.
Yeah, completely. No, thank you very much for your answer. And you were talking about your sort of 3-year business plan stuff, but tell us, is there anything coming up at Birds of Paradise? What are your plans for the future?
Well, like I say, we think at the end of January about funding. So there's quite a lot that depends on that. Not that, this is make or break, but it is quite a big determining factor in terms of the scale of what we do going
Yeah.
forward. We've got, as I say, we've got a project at the moment in Nepal for March that will be presented at the National Theatre in Nepal, and there'll be ways to see that around the world as well. So keep an eye on the website. We're also doing a play playing a paint, which is a sort of Scottish institution now. Commissioned a writer in Edinburgh to write a new play playing a paint. I'll be directing that play in May, so that'll be on in Glasgow in May. The writer called Simon J, who's a great disabled neurodivergent writer who, is going to create a great new piece of theatre from that. We've also got a lot of development stuff. So the Bob Young artists are a group of people who are coming together to develop performance skills. So that starts in February. They're going to come together for some workshops and to work together. And then we'll then spend the rest of the year developing skills as performers. So we've got more disabled actors out in the world in Scotland. So all of these things are ongoing at the moment. But until we know about funding, we can't really know what scale we can work at after that. So that's quite a big question mark at the moment.
Yeah. Well, fingers crossed for the funding's all positive. And just for people watching and listening, there's links to Birds of Paradise underneath the show, so you can find out more about the company and find Robert and stuff online and all that. And keep an eye on what he's doing. I've just got 2 more questions for you, Robert. I appreciate your time so much today. And one of them is, what's the biggest lesson you've learned in your career so far?
It's funny because when I've been asked this before, I sort of make a flippant joke. And now that I think of it, it's not that flippant. I think we're very guilty now for saying, keep going, don't give up, just keep trying and making it work. My experience is actually the opposite of that. Like sometimes it's all right to give up. Sometimes if you're trying to do a thing and it's not working for years and years, maybe you're doing the wrong sort of thing. Maybe, we're not all designed to be writers or directors or whatever. Things that other things that you are designed to be. So I think my big advice is keep going, keep trying, but also don't be afraid of giving up. And okay, don't mean giving up on everything, but I mean what the course that you're going in, the direction that you're going in. It's not a single direction. It'll twist and turn and go up and down and left and right. And that's okay. Go with that. Like enjoy the ride.
Completely.
But be up for changing direction.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's so true. And I think often people forget as well, sometimes the destination you think you want, it's not actually going to make you happy and it's not what you want anyway. So I think if you're right, sometimes you have to just feel that where am I at? And could I pivot slightly? I think it's being able to pivot when you need to. I think it's so true.
If you ask me at 20 what I've been doing at 45, it's not what I'm doing now, but I love what I'm doing now. So, Like, you have to be up for the race. It's a bit like when you're on stage, and then some actors who work out, right, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that, and then I'll feel like this, and then I'll do that. And when you work with actors like that, it's a bit weird because they've got it all planned out in their head, and they're doing it well, but they're not reacting to anything. They're not in the moment. I guess working and being in the moment, reacting to what's around you is much more, I think, much more valuable than having a master plan and sticking to it.
Yeah, completely. And it's hard to do that sometimes, but I think that's a
Yeah.
really, really nice answer. Really nice answer. Sort of closing question for you then, Robert. What would your sort of closing advice be to anyone that wants to work in theatre particularly, because that's your area of expertise?
Especially in Scotland, it's about your network. It's about who you know. It's about getting to know people and getting them to want to work with you. That is number one priority. And how you do that can vary and can change, but people need to want to work with you. So work out what your gimmick is, what you bring to the table, what your thing is, and then go and sell that to people. Tell them, I'm a great puppet maker, or I'm a great voice person, or whatever it is. Work out what your thing is, and then network. Get to know people, and then I think it comes. It does come.
And just to quickly, I think there's really good advice, and just want to quickly ask one more thing as a part of your answer, because there's a lot of people that I know who listen to the show who message me sometimes and say, I'm an introvert or I'm quite shy and I'm not good at networking. What would you say to those people? Do you just think outside the box maybe, or try and find a way that suits you?
There are various ways to network. It's like, I hate going to receptions because everyone's at a standing height. I'm in a wheelchair. They're all talking away at that height. It's loud. I've got speech impairment. They can't hear what I'm saying. I hate networking events. So if that's not for you, then that's fine. Get one-to-one meetings. Meet people for a coffee. People are quite busy, so maybe they go reply. Get them to come along to things that you're doing, and tell them that you'll come and sit in the rehearsal room. Find ways to meet people that work for you. There's a lot of introverts in theatre. Like, I think that's this idea that we're all very outgoing and brash. I think most theatre people I know hate being around a lot of people. Because when you think about it, what we do, we stand up on stage and we get everyone else to be quiet while we talk. We're not really into people, we're into what? That's a whole different thing.
Yeah, that's
So
interesting.
being introvert is not a problem, but it's about working out how you can network in the way that works for you. Even, Instagram is now such a powerful way of networking with people. Make videos and talk about what your passions are. Make a 2-minute video talking about the play that you want to write, and then get it up there. There's so many ways to get things out there now that work for you. Even if you're not working in the old-fashioned way, doesn't there's other ways to network.
Yeah, it totally is. And I didn't even consider when you were talking about how for you going to a networking event, like like one of those receptions, like with your disability and stuff, it's already like it's excluding you from that space, and that's so true. That I think if you're deaf as well, like I have a few friends that are deaf and they can't go to networking events in that way. So I think there's an industry-wide issue. We need to get better at organising more accessible networking. I think that's another topic.
But what I can do is email people directly and go, okay, let's have a coffee, or like networking events I don't think it's that useful for anybody actually.
No, because
But
no
I think
one
that,
who's actually
yeah,
making work goes to them anyway because they don't
no,
need to. They're working, so you're completely right.
exactly. So yeah, I think we think they're great, but they're not that great anyway.
It's
But
interesting.
yeah, I find a way that works for you.
Completely. Robert, thank you so much for your time
Thank
this afternoon.
you.
This is such a nice way to spend a lunch break. Honestly, keep doing what you're doing, man. Honestly, it's really inspiring to chat to you. It's honestly such a pleasure, and you're so passionate and so articulate, and yeah, you're killing it, man. So it's good to see. So thank you
Thanks so
so much
much.
for your time.
Thanks for having me on. Thank you.